there, welcome to the 60DS Community Lounge, where we bring in different superstars of the 60DS Legion to talk about anything and everything in the founder journey. I'm Manasvi, your host for this season. Today, we're joined by Nida Sumar. She's the founder of 60 Day Startups, the Table Project. Thank you for joining me, Nida. Why don't you go ahead and give us a little more in-depth introduction of yourself?
Thank you for having me, Manasvi. And like you have kindly introduced, I am the founder of 60 Day Startups, which I guess you're also part of as the senior fellow. And I'm very happy and honored to be part of your personal project, which is the Community Lounge. And also, so a little bit about my journey. I started as a finance professional in the audit and advisory industry about a long time ago, 18 years ago now, 18 or so, yeah. And then kind of jumped my way into industry, corporate finance, then moved to consulting for finance departments of SMEs and startups and helping them set up their finance functions. Moved from there into our family business, which was involved in steel fabrication, and helped them do the same thing, which was automate and set up their finance function. And then later on decided to start my own startup called Keza, which was a food tech startup, which I sold later in 2019. And I was very passionate about food, so and wanted to take a break from entrepreneurship and all the havoc that comes with being an entrepreneur, and decided to take a break and start a hobby like a passion project, which was the Table Project, which kind of grew legs of its own and turned into an underground supper club movement, one of the first in Dubai, and formed a community around it, and became its own little startup. Thereafter, during COVID, we'd started food drives to help serve the community. However, the way we were doing it was unsustainable, and I still wanted to give back to the community, which is where 60 Day Startups was actually formed, was to form a sustainable method or program to continue giving back to the community, especially a sector that I'm personally quite passionate about, which is women in business and women in entrepreneurship. So that's how 60 Days started, through the kind of legs of the Table Project, and then formed its own community, and a very thriving one at that. And we have now over 45 mentors. We have obviously 10 fellows.
Wow.
We have over 25 partners, I believe, or 20 partners, somewhere in that region. And we've just graduated our third cohort, as you know, and I think about, in total, just under 30 startups have been part of the program.
Awesome. And I think it's amazing that you mentioned the word community a lot within your answers, because that's what we're going to discuss today, community. So what exactly does community mean to you? How do you define it?
I think community doesn't need my definition. Each community kind of forms its own definition. And that really is the definition of community for me. It's a group of people that come together working for or in interest of something that is common for them, or a common passion. What that passion is, they decide sort of within that community themselves organically. And I guess just the community leaders help facilitate that definition and make sure that as the community grows, that passion, that for which the community initially came together just stays intact and at the core of the community. So really, that's just what community means to me. It's a bunch of driven people for the same shared passion.
All right. So, would you say you had a lot of supportive communities when you first stepped into the entrepreneurship space? So, first, which is a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah. 2013 was when I started, which is almost 10 years ago now. 2012 was the initial phase of Keza, and then we started building in 2013. And I would say initially, no. It was a very strange concept, right? Nobody understood, or the word entrepreneurship wasn't such a fad trend at the time. It was still a little bit of like moving in the corporate circles was a little bit more cooler at that time. So you were just, businessmen and women. That's what people knew. But initially, the communities that I had outside of the finance, obviously, community, even the finance community, I wouldn't say I had very strong community support initially. However, later on that changed. Somewhere around 2015, 16, 17, that started changing. And Keza had, applied for accelerator programs, some of the first few that were, just being born in the UAE at the time. Quickly found a couple of very, very supportive communities, one of which was Grow Me, which was a Sherry Blair Foundation project run for women, female-founded businesses in the UAE, and run by a mentor who's my mentor to date, Maria Pearson. And she was leading the first community that I actually found and still keep in touch with. And that's really where I realized what the power of community actually is and how much it can actually help you. Thereafter, then I joined Shura, which was another brilliant community in Sharjah, UAE. They also became sort of like second home for Keza. And I met a lot of incredible people. I think I'm in touch with most of them. And a lot of them came back to be mentors and be support systems for both the Table Project and 60-day startups. That's what really it is. It's just, when you build a strong community and you find strong communities, they help you accelerate and find connections for you that otherwise you couldn't yourself.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's nice to hear that it's evolved over time, like with having not much in place to having a couple. And now there's obviously so much more available, especially as we go digital. So I think I want to ask, within 60DS, within the cohort, we focus a lot on community building. Why do we do that? Why do we want to help these women create a resilient community?
I think, like I said, it's, entrepreneurship is a very lonely journey. And when you are a woman, and especially a woman of color, it's even more lonely because there isn't very much support out there for them. There aren't as many opportunities that can be made use of. And that is why community becomes even more important at that point, where when you don't have structured support, systemically, and there are certain biases, then the having of a community becomes that much more important, right? Because like I said, the communities will help you find opportunities that alone you're not able to, and also from a loneliness perspective, these are entrepreneurs that are undergoing tough journeys, both in business and personally. The change is massive, and people don't tend to realize how much personal impact becoming an entrepreneur has on your personal life as well. So having that support system with people that are going through the same thing, same problems, and having solutions be shared amongst them is one of the key core concepts of 60-day startups. But not only that, communities also evolve organically, and once you've been given support from a community, the tendency of coming back, first of all, the tendency or the probability of being successful is much higher. And then the probability of coming back and supporting that community is even then higher. So it's you're sort of creating a vicious cycle of support, if you may, when you focus on community building.
Yeah, that's a nice vicious cycle to create. I think one of the best ones to be generating, is amazing. So what do you think attracts people to join a community? And other than after attraction, given your experience, what retains them and then maybe facilitates growth within a community?
To be honest, I don't know. I think I would imagine it to be I think honesty towards the purpose that, or the intention with which the purpose is being served, or the community is being served with. Once there's things like trust, honesty, and the right intention, what happens is everything else becomes immaterial. You get connected to the core vision and mission, right? Otherwise, why would anybody spend their time, money, and effort building something or being a part of something that doesn't add value back to them, or makes them feel like they're needed, wanted, and they're creating an impact? So when somebody feels like they're creating an impact, or they're giving back, that is a really wonderful feeling, and it is a very good motivator for anybody to be part of a community that they align with in terms of their passion. So I think that is what really attracts people, or the right kind of people, to any community, whether it's the Table Project or 60-day startups or NAPTA. All of these are very strong. At the core of that is community, and because they have strong purposes and missions that people relate to, identify with, and resonate with, that's why I think they form very strong community links around them.
What's your favorite community story? Is there any instance that you always hold on to, that your community maybe came together for, did something, helped you some way, or maybe you helped them? Is there any story you have?
There's so many, Manasvi. Oh my goodness. What a tough question. I mean, I'll tell you a couple. I'll tell you three. Okay. So the first was, so at the peak of COVID, I got stuck in New York. I was invited to host a couple of supper club tables in New York, and wasn't able to do that. Flights got closed to return home, and I got stuck. All I did was really send out a message on my Instagram to the Table Project community. At the time, 60DS didn't exist. So I just sent out a message to the Table Project community telling them what's happening and I'm stuck. And, I'm here, I'm not doing much. So there's, obviously New York was the epicenter of the pandemic. So, I was like, what can we do to help frontline workers? And I started cooking, and all I said, whoever wants to pitch in, all the way from Dubai. They found somehow contacts in New York that would send me funds for grocery shopping. They would find transport, and I would cook for doctors and frontline workers in hospitals, because they were working really hard, and just someone to send them a nice meal was something that we could do. So that got pulled off remotely when remote working wasn't as evolved as it is post-pandemic, or I don't know if we're post-pandemic, but significantly within the pandemic, right? So that happened. That was one of the most wonderful, shows of coming together as a community. The second one followed very shortly thereafter was in the UAE when I came back, and we started our food drives and continue to do food drives till date for different groups of, people that are in need.
Mm.
At the time, we were doing drives for people who had lost their jobs, and stuff like that, who couldn't afford meals or groceries for their families. We sort of helped them through our food drives and grocery drives. And then repatriation drives, people that were stuck here during the pandemic and couldn't afford to go back home, we repatriated them, all through community support. There's no way we could have done it otherwise, and continue to do that. Recently, we did food drives in Ramadan for delivery riders, of Talabat, Green, and so on, all of these delivery aggregators. And everybody just comes together. We've done it for the Karachi floods, for the Beirut blasts. We've helped several of these sort of unfortunate events, and tried to do our part there. But the biggest example of, I guess, communities coming together is 60DS, right? It was just it was just me reaching out to people I knew, and networks of networks.
Yeah.
And all I said was, I want to help create a program for underrepresented women so that we change the metrics of representation in the ecosystem and in the region for women of color, and just change the metrics. And that was all I said, Manaswe. They all flooded, and all I'd asked for was like, I need a couple of hours from you. And they were all like, yes, I'm in, yes, I'm in, yes, I'm in. And for no expectation of return, right? Because they believed in the issue and they resonated with the problem. They liked what it would give back to them. And they just joined hands, and 60DS is now 2 years in, right? And look at our community. It is done without a dime of investment. So that is unheard of, and that's kind of where it stands. That's the biggest, I guess, example.
Great. So I think within everything you've told us so far, there are a couple of strategies for community building that you've shared. That is, first of all, just understanding what the problem you're solving is, communicating that through your mission and vision effectively. Also, maybe clarifying the ask from the people that you want something from, and just being honest, truthful, transparent about your brand. So I think those are some very basic ground level principles that you need to build when you're building a community. Do you have any other strategies or any other advice you would want to suggest for anyone building a socially beneficial community?
I think just be patient. Just be very patient with yourself, with the people that are joining you. It is something, it's an organism almost that evolves and grows, right? And it will have different phases, and don't be stuck at be open to the change, the good change that will come with the evolving of your community. So that facilitates more and more sort of traction. I think that's super important. One of the things that I find honestly missing quite a bit is creating very clear processes early on. Every organization, whether it's a community, whether it's for-profit, not-for-profit, anything, it needs clear guidelines and roles and responsibilities. Unless there is that, there's a lot of room for friction and just politics to unnecessary politics to come into play. So once you have identified yourself or a couple of people as leaders of the community, what they should do is create a set of processes that is needed for the community to function well. And to avoid all sorts of unnecessary, confusion, mistakes, like a lack of clarity and stuff like that. Do that really is building the strong foundation. So building a strong foundation is part of it, goes into like, the honesty, integrity, transparency, all of those things also actually come with good processes and good documentation, etc. So I would suggest that be a very key ingredient to building any community.
That makes sense. Of course. I think, like you said, any organization at this point, any group needs some sort of system or a process or a pathway to follow. Otherwise, you're just lost, right? You don't know what you're doing. Great. So I think I want to ask you something that stops a lot of people from either continuing to build their community or even trying. I think a lot of people believe that a community needs to be really large for it to be effective. Is that true? Does it need to be really large?
No, even 3 people is a community, right? And that's how it really starts. I don't think anything needs to be, it depends on your purpose. What are you trying to achieve, right? For example, for 60DS, it was to change the metrics around women in business or women of color in startups, startup ecosystem in the region in UAE. That's how we started. So for me, even having one more female, business, female-owned business coming to life was a win. Yeah. It was that many more. It did change the metric on a much smaller level, but it did, right? So that's so underestimating the power of 2 or 3 is I would say, refrain from that, because that's how everything starts. Actually, everything starts with just one person thinking about it. Yeah. And then you build momentum around that vision and share that vision with someone who believes in it. It only starts with a few people. And then once you gain clarity, it starts growing, and then it picks up on its own. And at some point, it's probably too large for even you to realize how to figure things out, But no, I don't think that should be a deterrent, that it's too small in the beginning or anything like that. Just be patient, have clarity, and be consistent and work towards that vision. Changing the first number or making a change on a smaller scale, be the goal. Let that be the goal first before trying to change too many things or very large numbers in the beginning.
Absolutely. Got it. So be patient and work towards your goal. I think it's very important. Great. So I know we're an online community, right? Our programs based pretty much virtually. Everything is virtual. But it's also very easy to get lost in the tech and social media, and it sometimes is a deterrent to building a true connection. So what's your take on community building with these tools? Do you think it's a catalyst or sort of destroys the connection?
I'm a very strong believer in accessibility. And tech makes things accessible for people who otherwise would not have access to these sort of communities, right? Especially for when it comes to serving underrepresented communities, we have to be very mindful that the resources at their disposal are a lot less and fewer than what would otherwise be available to, just generally. So keeping that in mind, tech is an enabler. I see it as that. However, I'm also a very big believer in in-person communities, and I think the replacement is non-existent. So creating a hybrid sort of community feel is probably the most ideal way of building communities. A lot of the so during COVID, obviously everything had to be virtual, so it made things easy for us to build that way. We didn't have to explain to anybody why we're doing things virtually versus not in person. But the vision was always to stay virtual. It was never to build an in-person sort of or a majorly in-person community. However, after COVID, what we've started doing is encouraging meetups and encouraging gatherings and networking events that are outside of the formal program delivery. The program delivery and the knowledge delivery still remains primarily and largely virtual. Everything else to build better connections with each other within the community becomes in person and a lot more optional and a little bit more free flowing than having to be somewhere in person becomes difficult. So I think that's the right mix for this community. Obviously for other communities completely different, like something like the Table Project was a completely in-person community, and virtual trying to do things virtually actually didn't work. It was one of the things that backfires a lot of times is when I try to automate things, the community just doesn't accept it, because the whole purpose and the foundation was built in person, and that's what the people want. So I think the characteristic of each community will be different, and it's up to the community to decide what is the best way forward. Building it virtually, building it in person or hybrid, all are possible and all are fine. You just have to figure out which one works for your community.
Fair enough. I think that's very fair. My first and actually most of my community experiences have been virtual because of the pandemic. And even though my vision is probably like destroyed, I think just the connections that I've made and like the people I've spoken to would not have been possible without the tech tools like that we have. So yeah, it's very true. Now I want to ask you something. Your causes are quite interesting. And you could say they're trendy as well. There's food and there's startups and there's women and food again. But what if my cause is important, but it's boring? How do I drive action? How do I make it seem attractive?
It has to be interesting to you.
Okay.
That's the key part. I don't even know, and I was never conscious that my causes or my movements were trendy. They were just things that I really loved. I mean, I am a trained chef, so I love food. I've loved food since I was 11. I love finance, so I'm also part of the CFA community now, more formally. Not very trendy, very boring, but to me, very interesting, and 60 Dias came very easily because it was my own entrepreneurship journey that I wished would have, been different. So created that. I don't think any cause is boring or popular. I think if you find it interesting, you will find find other people that will find it interesting, right? If it is a small community, it doesn't matter. You will still find a significant number of people for your niche. It's just a matter of defining that niche and being really, really passionate about it. I think building communities or building organizations or even being an entrepreneur just for fad or trend is something completely unsustainable, because it is hard work. It takes long hours, long efforts, lots of tears, blood, sweat, everything, right? It takes really everything out of you to build something like that. If you're not passionate about it, and if you don't find that cause interesting, tough luck. You're not gonna get very far with it. So I think I do not believe that there's something trendy and not trendy. If it's something that's interesting to you, you will probably make it trendy
Okay.
because you work for it in that way. So yeah.
I just have one last question for you. Do you have any last words of advice you'd like to share with anyone
Gosh,
working
I
towards
feel
success?
so old when people ask me for words of advice. Sorry, I interrupted you, but last words of advice for anyone working with a cause or
Yeah,
community.
working towards any cause with a mission and a vision. Any advice for them?
Um, I guess just stick to it. Be true to yourself. Really. There's no bigger joy than actually seeing things come to life, things that you really care about, you believe in, and then see other people also believe in that, and then create actual change in that area. So just be very true to what you're working towards. I think is probably going to be my biggest, and be and you know do it with honesty and integrity, and I think a lot of goodwill, uh, and try not to expect things in return for what you're working towards, especially if it's a not-for-profit cause. Uh, don't think you're going to get something out of it. If you do, that's bonus. But your true return should be actually making that change. So, or working for that cause. That should be your motivator. So being true to that is, I think, going to be probably my biggest advice.
Awesome. That was amazing. And thank you so much for your time today, Nida. Thank you, everyone, for watching or listening. And stay tuned for the next episode of the 60 Days Community Lounge. Follow us on the 60 Days Startup accounts on Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, you name it, we're there. And also sign up to our newsletter on our website for regular updates. Take care and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.